Okay, we are interviewing today Terry Fujikawa, and it is on January 19th, 2011, in Torrance, California. This is Paul Watanabe, and the interview is being done by the Institute for Asian American Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Good morning, Terry.
Morning.
Uh, let's begin with the present. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and briefly about what you're doing with your life right now.
Right now, my husband and I are very busy helping the 100th Infantry Battalion veterans, of which he is the current president of the mainland chapter. The main headquarters is in Honolulu, of course, because the 100th was started in Hawaii, the 100th Battalion. But Sam and I are very busy also being volunteers here at the Gopher Brook National Educational Center. And it keeps us very busy because it's, especially now that many of the veterans, were losing them because of our age and time and everything. Sam gets called upon a lot.
Mm.
And so we both go to many of the events that are said. They say, oh, we want as many veterans as possible to attend. And it's just one thing after another. But it's very rewarding because we feel that whatever we do to help in this way, it's going to help the legacy of the wonderful work of sacrifices and the bravery of the fierce fighting that the 100th 442nd MIS men did during the World War II.
It's wonderful that you and your husband are keeping alive this important part, not only of Japanese American history, but really of the nation's history. Let me now take you back to, if you can just tell us a little bit about where you were born and your family, your parents, siblings that you might have had.
I was born in San Francisco in 1926 and raised there. I lived there until I was age 14 when the war started, World War II, and our family was sent to Tanforan Racetrack in San Bruno, just south of San Francisco, in April of 1942. And we were there until September of 1942 when Tanforan people were sent to Topaz, Utah. And there we stayed until March of 1944. And during that time, I attended high school, Topaz High, and graduated at a summer session, which was a real bad experience for me because 1 month before, I was in the senior class, but 1 month before graduation, the principal decided that I was not to graduate with my class. And the reason was because I had evidently gotten a little ahead of myself, and I was 16, and he had never heard of anybody graduating high school when they were 16.
You were too smart.
And that was the reason why I was not going to be able to graduate. And so that was one bad experience. But this, I feel that looking back, this principal was very discriminatory, and that was one of the reasons why he did this.
This was at Topaz.
In Topaz. And he was a Caucasian. I think his last name was Golden, Mr. Golden. And it really was because my friend, who was 3 years older than me, and because she had gone to Japan and got behind in her classes, she got told she couldn't graduate. And so she said, well, how come? Because I'm much older than everybody else. He said, well, age doesn't matter. And so I feel that that was very discriminating of him to do that to students. And so even in camp, we ran into discrimination. And anyway, our family went to New York. We were released, and my older sister immediately started investigating whether she could finish her college degree because she had started UC Berkeley before the war. And the Japanese American National Student Relocation Council at that time was already being very active and helped her enter Hunter College in New York City. And so she was able to continue. But I continued working at the national headquarters of YWCA until my parents decided that I should finish my schooling. And so I was allowed to apply to colleges outside of New York, and they chose Boston University because that wasn't too far from New York. And the National Japanese American Student Relocation accepted me as an applicant, and I was able to enter Boston University because of their help. And
let me stop you right here, because I want to pick up the story again, but so I'm going to remember that you're on the verge of going to Boston University. But if you don't mind, can we go back just a little bit again? So you were in high school just before internment. You were in high school in San Francisco at Lowell High School, as
yes.
I understand.
Yes.
And if you wouldn't mind, just if you have some thoughts or memories about when the war started. So you were a high school student at the time, and with your family. And do you have any memories of when the war started and when the evacuation order came down?
A little bit. It's such a long time. Yeah. But I remember the principal of Lowell High School called a special assembly right after the war started and urged the students that they should not, because already some of the students were calling us names and Japs and whatever, and he didn't want that. He wanted the students to behave, and so there was that, and of course all the packing and selling of our household goods and everything was a big problem for my parents, and so I don't really remember whether we got in their way or whether we helped them or not.
You've mentioned your sister. Was that your only sibling?
Yes, my older sister, Aiko, had already started UC Berkeley, and she was still trying to continue. Right. It meant commuting from San Francisco to Berkeley every day, but she went as long as it was safe to go. I think bad things were beginning to happen, and dangerous as far as my parents felt. And so I think by the time we were actually evacuated, we didn't have too much notice to gather up, only what we could carry. The rest we had to somehow think of storing it in a friend's garage or basement, which we had a friend who was using her basement to store her friend's things. The house that we lived in was on Buchanan Street. We did not own, and so we didn't have our own basement to do this type of storage. So that we ended up at Topaz, Tanforan.
Can you tell us a little, do you have any memories of Assembly Center in Tanforan?
Not too much, except that when our family got there, some of my other friends had already been there, and they were so happy to see us and helped us carry whatever we needed help doing, and then it was time for us to go eat. And so what we had to, were told to buy tin plates, cup, and spoon and fork, I guess it was. So we carried our utensils and stood in this long line at the mess hall, and it was terrible food. It was, I think it was supposed to be beef stew, but it looked like vomit. And then the bread was green, it was moldy green. And my mother remembers that we sat there not eating with just tears in our eyes. I don't remember that, but I remember the green bread and the thing that looked like herb.
Yeah.
And so when we got back to our room that we were assigned, all of us had to be in one room. So it was just wall-to-wall bed and cots. And our friends who had helped us found this last box of fried chicken that my mother had cooked that was supposed to be our last meal. They found it and they had eaten everything. And so even though we had not eaten anything at the mess hall, we had nothing to eat. So I sort of remember that, being very hungry the very first night we were there.
Can you tell us a little bit of then moving from Tanforan to Topaz? Do you have any recollections of that experience?
Only that we had to be in this old train that, I think it took 3 days, and we were never allowed to get off. And I don't know, they said we had to pull down the shades too, I think, when we passed through towns and things. I don't remember too much of that.
Any remembrances of when you finally got to Topaz?
Yes. I remember that. We got off. Well, of course, there were buses waiting for us at Delta, where we got off, to take us to Topaz, which was in the middle of this desert. And we got off, and as we got off the bus, it wasn't dirt or sand. It was like silt. And so each step we took was this puff of dust. And there was this Boy Scout troop. They were playing a welcome song. I can't remember what the song was, but they were trying so hard to cheer us up. But then we weren't really ready to be cheered up. And then we got hustled into lines where we had to apply for a room that we could all be together. And my father did all that, of course. And we just had to sit around and wait while it was finished. And of course, other friends of ours had reached there, and they were sort of waiting around to help us settle into our room, one room. But that was what I recall.
And you talked a little bit about, so you attended, so they had regular high school in the camp.
As soon as they could, they started school
Yeah.
for the children, all the children.
And do you remember any activities? How did you keep busy, or did you keep busy?
Well, my good girlfriend and I started working as soon as we can, and we got a job at what they called a co-op. We were soda jerks.
Really?
It was actually just all we had was soda pop. And that was in between, but we were still going to high school. And so that kept us busy. We had homework, and they recruited many of the teachers from the actual people who were evacuated. And my older sister became a 4th grade teacher in the elementary school. So she had a whole classroom of students. And there were two areas for elementary school and one big area for the high school. And so I thought, I'm going to put myself back. I was supposed to be in the senior class, so I put myself back into the junior class so that I would be with, at that age is very important And so I never told anybody how old I was, but I put myself back into the junior class. And they found out by my school records I was supposed to be in the senior class. So they stuck me back in the senior class. And that's why that thing happened about 1 month before graduation. The principal decided to get into the picture.
How did that ever get resolved? So you clearly, you graduated ultimately.
Well, yes, I had to attend summer school.
Mhm.
And that was a big joke because summer school ended August the 13th. I'll never forget. But my birthday, it wasn't until October the 1st. So I was still 16. And, you know, this principal gathered up his family and left the very next day after August the 13th.
So you were telling us a little bit about some of the discussions about the possibility of going to college, beginning, I think, with your sister is what you implied.
Yes, yes.
And so some of these discussions clearly took place in your family and then with some outside individuals in the council. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yes, there was this War Relocation Authority that had been set up in many of the large cities, and through them, they had found out about this Nisei Relocation Council, which was headquartered in Philadelphia. And so I made many trips to Philadelphia for interviews with this council to see if I was eligible, or my school grades and my interests and
Can you tell us just a little, and I want to pick up on that again, can you tell us a little bit about, so your family was able to leave the camp in Topaz and during the war relocate in New York, if I'm not mistaken?
yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that process? Do you remember that, and how your family was able to be able to move during the war?
Yes, when we were given permission to leave camp, we were all given $25 each. And my father picked New York because through his travels from working for the import-export firm, he knew that that would be a good place because there were many, many good schools in and around New York. And that's why we ended up in New York. But it took, I think it took at least 2.5 days to get from Topaz to New York because we had to stay overnight in Chicago, I remember. And but when we got there, immediately War Relocation had arranged for us to rent an apartment off of Broadway near St. John's Cathedral, which is quite lovely. And but we were all squashed into this very small apartment. It was 5 of us: my mother, father, and my 2 sisters and myself. Oh, and we also had my auntie, my mother's sister. There were 6 of us. And so we we managed, though, because this apartment was also rented to other people who had left camp.
Oh, really?
And so it wasn't like we had a whole apartment. We just had maybe 2 rooms and the use of the kitchen and the bathrooms to share with the other people living in this apartment. And that's the sort of arrangement we had.
Did this seem like a big improvement over Topaz at least?
Oh, definitely. One of the first things we did, we found this bakery near this apartment that had this wonderful whipped cream chocolate chip cake. And we must have had maybe lunch and dinner every day. And we got sick. It was too rich for our appetites by that time. We
Okay,
did silly things like that.
Oh, great. And so I kind of interrupted you when you were talking about, so while you were in New York, some of the thoughts for you started to turn about going to college. And so you began this process of working with the Student Relocation Council. And so your sister had previously had some connections with them, correct? Do you want to say a little bit about how your family actually first got involved with the council? It was really through your sister initially, correct?
It was actually through the War Relocation
Mhm.
Authority,
Mhm.
WRA,
Mhm.
that contacted this group. And Mrs. Emlyn, I have the original letter here, telling my sister that she was accepted as a student and would be granted monetary aid for her tuition and other necessary expenses, but that they would not be able to pay for things like dormitories. But Hunter College was a city college,
Mhm.
so it wasn't the kind that had dormitories anyway. So it was within subway travel distance from our apartment, so that worked out very nicely.
So your sister went to Hunter as a product of this.
Yes.
And then in the letter, as I understand it, there was some mention of the possibility of you going.
Yes, by then my parents had started to think that maybe I should start college,
Mhm.
and so I was allowed to. By then, my younger sister, who had not finished high
Mhm.
school, was finishing high school in New York, and so she had sort of caught up to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be in any same classes with her because
Right.
she's very smart. And so I was allowed to apply to colleges out of state.
I see.
And Boston University was the one that they chose, my parents, because they felt it was close enough to New York City that I needed to get home. I would be able to somehow do that. And um, the council, the Rural Relocation Student Council, paid for my tuition and I think part of my dormitory expenses.
My goodness.
But by then, my parents were both working. My mother, who had never worked, was working in a millinery shop, and my father had found a job at the Mount Sinai Hospital in the record room, and he hated that job. And because he was a director of a big company before.
Oh, really?
Anyway, we all needed to work, and I worked too, and so did my older sister. And I actually worked at the YWCA headquarters, and they helped me take my entrance exams to Boston University by not having to go there all the way to Boston, but I took my exam right there in New York,
Wow.
and because they got permission from Boston University that I do that. And luckily I passed my exams. And
Uh, and I do want to now really pick up on your experiences at Boston University. But you had mentioned that you had traveled to Philadelphia a couple times to interview. So can you tell us a little bit about that process? Because so the council had you talk to them a little bit before you selected which university you were
yes,
going
I
to?
think they sort of helped me choose which ones I should actually apply to
I see.
because of experiences that they had already had with other students,
Uh-huh.
and knew that perhaps this one or that one will be more likely to accept a Japanese
Uh-huh.
during World War II.
Yeah. Wow.
And so,
So you went through that process with them, and you said you applied to a few different colleges and universities.
Yes.
And do you recall whether you got accepted to all of them, or?
one was Baldwin, it was in Ohio. They actually wrote me a letter
Bowling
that
Green could have been?
Baldwin,
No, I'm guessing. There's a Bowling Green as a university.
I think
in
it
Ohio.
was.
Yeah,
I think
Bowling
it
Green,
was.
Ohio.
It was a well-known college,
Uh-huh.
and they actually wrote me a letter and said they will not accept me because I'm Japanese.
Yeah.
But all the others, Maryland and Purdue, and I guess I applied to 2 or 3 others besides Boston, but Boston was the one that my parents chose because my father liked that.
Okay.
He had been to Boston.
Okay, so you are now, you've been accepted at Boston University. You've got this help from the council and then some generous financial support, it sounds like, as well, to go to college.
Yes.
So do you have any remembrances now of leaving New York and going to university for the first time and arriving in Boston?
A little bit. It's so long
Uh-huh,
ago.
yeah.
1946. My older sister went with me,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of to deliver me there.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed at the YWCA initially, and until Boston University could find an assignment for my dormitory accommodations. And by then they had run out of a dormitory room, so Boston University had rented space from the New England Conservatory of Music dormitories. So I ended up there and met a wonderful, wonderful friend who is still my friend, my roommate. She was Julia Del Teno from Canaan, Connecticut. And we just, and everyone, even at the dormitory, just sort of welcomed me. They were all so nice. And even at, I went to the College of Practical Arts and Letters of Boston University. I don't know if they were warned that a Japanese was going to be attending, but everyone was so good to me, welcomed me. And they only had to learn one new name.
Uh-huh.
And so they were so happy that they could say my whole name, Teruko Nakamizo.
Mm-hmm.
They were so proud they could pronounce it. And so they were I was very fortunate.
You mentioned some of your classmates, of which it sounds like even your roommate is still a friend after all of
Yes,
these
I just
years.
talked to her last week.
My goodness.
About an hour and a half, we just talked about all kinds of fun things that we did together, and we just had such a good time.
Did you have, going into this, do you remember having any concerns about going to the university and being Japanese, and a time when
I
being
did.
Japanese might have
I
been a bit of
did.
a...
There were several incidents in New York City while we were living there that were not good,
Mm-hmm.
very unpleasant, and sometimes scary.
Mm-hmm.
A woman walked up from behind my sister coming home from college one day with a book and slammed my sister's head with the book and yelled at her for being a Jap. And scary things did happen to us. And butcher stores wouldn't sell meat to my mother. We all had ration coupons, and they wouldn't accept it. And so I don't know, my mother got chicken, I guess. But anyway, we ran into a lot of things like that I worried about when I first left home.
Mm-hmm.
But the people at the YWCA warned me. They said, now you remember that Boston is a very proper city, and people are very sort of not too jovial and friendly, so they might even be cold, and so don't be too scared. But they weren't. They were so nice. Everybody I encountered were just so eager to try to get to know me, I guess, and I was very fortunate.
Were there any other Japanese students at Boston University, do you recall, when you went there?
Evidently there were, but I didn't know
I
about
see.
them, except the Hibino family had Nobu, the oldest, was married into the Hibino family, and she was actually at Boston University. And I understand that Kyochi also was, but he was the same year as I was, and so he was, every once in a while would call me, and so I sort of talked to him back and forth, but I didn't know of any other
I see.
Japanese students there, except that I have a picture there of a gathering on Easter morning of Japanese, not only students, but people who had actually settled in the Boston University or Boston and Cambridge area that you might like to
Yes.
have for your records.
Absolutely.
But
when you got outside the campus, although Boston University, very familiar with it, sort of is right in the city. It's not almost like a separate campus. So the city and the campus are about the same. Do you have any recollections of just going outside of the campus environment and what it was like? And did you feel welcome? Did you have some trepidation? Like you talked about some of the experiences in New York, which gave you pause.
I didn't have too much because I just sort of stayed with everybody from the dormitory. Whenever we had to go out to eat or whatever, they all sort of gathered around and made sure, like a waitress maybe didn't want to wait on me and waited on everybody else, and they would just rear up and really protect, made sure that I was waited on, and very protective of me. So I really didn't go out, except with Julie. The two of us used to go shopping downtown to Feline's, very famous Feline's department store, and we liked the basement because they had wonderful fun things. And I always stayed with a friend.
Wow. What do you remember? What subject you studied?
I was an art student.
Art student.
Yes, and we had to carry huge supplies, like a great big. It looked like it was a drawing table, but it was a thick piece of wood. And Julia would make me walk behind her in the wintertime. She was 5'10", and here I was 5'2", and she would make me walk. No, the snow used to get like 2 feet high in the wintertime.
Still does.
It still does, yeah. And she used to make me walk behind her and use her footsteps so that I wouldn't disappear. And she said, "Terry, are you still coming?" And the wind would be blowing this big drawing table. It was like a sail on a sailboat. And she was so worried that I would fly away.
Oh, what a wonderful friend.
And so we would have to walk to school, because from our dormitory to school, because we were both poor and we were trying to save money by not having to take the bus.
So I want to talk about a little bit now about, so at some point you had to leave BU, or you left BU. What did that entail?
Well, I got my associate's degree and went back to New York to live and work. And I went back to the Y. They always hired me, even on Easter vacations, 2 weeks, so that I could earn money towards my college. And so I didn't have to look for a job. But I did, because I had majored in art. I actually found a job with Henry Billings, who was at that time a well-known American artist. And his good friend was Isamu Noguchi. And when I went for my interview, all the other interviewees had these real neat little portfolios. And here I still had my great big huge 20 by 30 folder with artwork that I had done in school. And they hired me.
Wow.
And I felt sorry for all these people who looked like they were so organized with their portfolios. But it was because this Henry Billings, who was the art director, knew Isamu Noguchi. He was a good friend.
Wow. Did you ever get to meet Isamu Noguchi?
No, I didn't. But I understand that he had the commission to do all the murals on the second floor of Radio City. The second floor.
Wow.
That's his.
What was your job with Billings?
I was an illustrator, artist, and they had things that they did for companies like Disney. The one was the Mickey Mouse holding a Mickey Mouse watch, and I had learned how to airbrush and do things like that. So I did that for a while until I got married.
Did you enjoy this artwork?
Oh, I loved it. It was fun. It was fun, not work.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your marriage. So when you met Sam.
Oh, well, Actually, he was in my chemistry class in camp.
Ah,
That's where we first met.
so you first
But-
knew him from, yeah.
Yes, but it was just friends.
Uh-huh.
And then when we moved out to New York, on his way overseas, he, well, no, I guess we started a correspondence when our family left. And so when he got drafted in camp.
Mhm.
And on his way overseas, he stopped and visited with me. So I saw him off when he went overseas.
Wow.
And we kept up a correspondence
war.
during the war.
Yeah.
Yes. And then when he came home on the Victory ship with the rest of the 100th 442nd, I met him at the dock.
Oh my goodness.
I was there. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, they had this one gangplank that everybody got off, and I was standing at the bottom, and so I watched each person get off. But you know, they all had the same thing on. They all needed a haircut. They were all really dark from being on deck during the, I think it took them how many days to get home? 14 days on the ocean. Anyway, I never found him.
Oh, no. He must have been looking for you, too.
I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, they all had to say their name to whoever was checking them off as they got off, and they got into formation. But my girlfriend found him after they all finished, and so Cooney, her name was, she went and she was having a conversation with him, and she's going, Terry, over here, over here. And so I looked at, oh, it was Sam. And so I went running over, and he picked me up and he whirled me around. It was a happy reunion.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So, after this, you got
Oh.
married, right?
Yes, yes. We kept up. Well, we had a sort of a long distance thing. He was in Cleveland. His family was in Cleveland, so he settled in Cleveland. And so he would come for holidays and different visits. And you know, we ended up getting married. But I knew him 7 years before we got married.
Wow. And I see, yeah. So, I want you to tell us a little bit more about your experience. I know it's a long life after the camps, beginning as you've been talking about. Just kind of briefly tell us a little bit about your life after camp, what work you did and the family you raised.
Well, after I went to college,
Yep.
and then I worked for 2 years for this advertising agency as an artist, and then went to Cleveland after we were married, and I worked for American Greetings as an artist designer, and until every summer Sam and I would come to California for our vacation, and finally we said, well, no, we're coming out here every summer, why don't we just move back to California? And so that's exactly what we did. And in the meantime, we were trying to have children and we didn't, and so it was a good time to move. And we did hear that there were some agencies here who had Japanese babies to adopt. So we even thought about that. And so we moved back to California. And I ended up working for Rand Corporation. And amazing, for a while you get your secret clearance, you have to sit in this area, what they called it cold storage. Because you don't have everyone at that time at Rand had to have a clearance, a secret clearance. And what I went into was a little bit more involved, and so, but I got my secret clearance immediately because the FBI already had all my records, and some of the other people I started with, they were there for months. But I started working at Rand very, very nicely, and then they started doing top secret things, and I needed this extra top secret, which also went very smoothly because the FBI already had my records, and it took other people a long time to get their top secret clearance. But I can't talk about what I did, but it was very, very exciting and very rewarding, and then I was there 18 and a half years, and Honeywell came, and by then I was 50, 51 or something, and Rand helped me finish my degree. I went to Immaculate Heart College while I was working at Rand, and I finished my bachelor's there at Immaculate Heart, and also connected with art, but I had a secondary subject that was social studies, for which I wrote that term paper that I'm leaving with you.
Oh,
I think that explains a lot about how I felt. I remembered how I felt. Now it's so long, I try to sit down and think about what did I think and what did I do, and I can't remember too well anymore.
well, let me pick up from that sort of here at the end, sort of. So I know I've asked you a lot of questions trying to get you to remember about things in the past, and I know it's hard, but you've done a great job. Sort of, actually, you don't even have to think about how you felt at the time. I'm sort of asking you how you feel now after all of these years. Obviously, this experience, going to camp, going to college, being assisted by all of these different people, from your roommate to the council and so forth. And so what I think a lot of people don't have a lot of information about, this process. And so just based on the perspective here, 2011, looking back on it, what do you see any sort of legacies or lessons about that experience? Anything that other people can learn from it?
Well, I don't know about learning anything from me, but thinking back, I think the war was still raging, and many of us left our families and to go to colleges in different strange places. I think we were a little bit brave also. Of course, the horrible fighting and fierce fighting that the men were going through overseas doesn't nearly compare to the danger that we had to go through. But as far as bravery goes, I think some of it has to be given credit to us who actually went to the unknown to do this going to college type of thing. And I was just very fortunate. But I think some of the other students must have run into a lot of unpleasant experiences. As even living in Cleveland, I remember visiting some friends. They were all Caucasians that lived way out in the country. And at one time, I was going down the hill to where this friend lived, and some woman came out, flying out of her house, and started hitting me all over. Said, you Jap, get out of here, get off my property. And it was like, this has been a long time since anything like that had happened to me. And I was in a state of shock. And so by the time I reached my friend's house, they were just all around me and protecting me. And then one couple went up and yelled at this woman for doing that. Just, don't you know her husband fought overseas for America and risked his life so that people like you could live freely the way you are. And I guess this woman my friend yelled at this woman and told her all kinds of things like that. So even that sort of things will happen. And Julie, my very good friend to this day, she keeps saying, Terry, you never told me you were in a camp. And, I never talked about it. She never realized. But now she knows because I've told her everything. I've given her a copy of this thing that I'm giving you, of this term paper.
How long did it take you to sort of talk to people about the camp then. So here you are, your roommate in college, you showed up and she made these, and ultimately you wrote this term paper, but it doesn't
was not
sound like it's
until
an experience you talked a lot about early on.
I actually didn't talk too much about it to people other than Japanese, people who either were in camp with me or other Japanese people, because nobody would understand.
Was it painful to think about some of
Yes,
that? Yeah.
I think it was painful. And that's why I say that those of us who left family and home to just go to a strange place to go to school were sort of brave to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a great point to end on. I appreciate everything you've done, and it's been a great listening to you. This is wonderful information.
Well, you have my permission to delete anything.
We're not going to delete anything. Every word was precious. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.